Holy City Center Radio, it is episode 282, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Friday, August 2nd, 2020. Here is wishing that you have an amazing weekend ahead. I also hope the week behind you wasn't too shabby, and if it was not your best week, it's all right. It's behind you. As I said, it's Friday. It's time for the weekend. If you need some plans, go to holycitycenter.com/calendar. All sorts of good things going on in town this weekend and beyond. It is all there waiting for you to discover it and find some amazing plans. Before we dive into the latest news, couple quick updates here in Holy City Centerland. Number one, my parents, who had been visiting, have gone back home. They're on their way as we speak, and as you're listening, depending on what day you listen. But already missing them. It was great having them here. You may remember that my brother and his family were here for a portion of my parents' visit as well, which is always one of my favorite times of the year when we're all together here in Charleston. I do go back to Connecticut to see them, which is also great. But it's a lot of fun to have them all here, and seeing Charleston. They're well aware of Charleston. They've been here many times, but I mean, being here again and seeing what's new, seeing what's changed, seeing my world and the stuff I talk about to them. It's always nice to share that with them, and especially the kids. But yeah, my parents were here for a few weeks, and I had a great time with them, whether it was just hanging out and doing nothing, or going out to eat, or going to the tattoo shop with my mom again, which was a lot of fun. Spending time with their dogs, seeing how they interacted with my cat, and so it was just a lot of fun, and I miss them already. But great times having them here. So back to just me and Kitty all by our lonesome here in my place. But that's okay. We're used to that. Just takes a little bit of an adjustment or day or two to get used to not having people, in my house. And, when I wake up in the morning and heading downstairs, not having two doggies to greet me and for me to pet and try to snuggle with. But we're back to normal, as it were. And recording this on Thursday, which is August 1st, which happens to be Holy City Center's anniversary. That's right. On August 1st of 2011, I launched holycitycenter.com officially. The website was up before that, but that is when I really was like, all right, let's do this, and made an effort to start sharing it with people and, posting on social media. So that's the official launch date. 13 years. Yes, my baby is officially a teenager. I can't believe it. 13 years. Where has the time gone? It has been a wild and fun ride that has led to a lot of very unexpected places. Brought a lot of joy for me, and helped me meet so many people that I probably would have met otherwise. Some friendships that were somehow related to the website. It's just been a great ride. I'm very thankful, and to all of you specifically, because without, whether it's sharing stuff online, listening to this podcast, interacting on social media, without you all, this would have stopped a long time ago, because I'm like, no one's paying attention to it, so I would have given it up. But it's maintained enough of a following over these 13 years to warrant, in my eyes, continuing, and I appreciate it, and it's been a blast. So thank you to all of you for helping me get something that I created and have put so much time and effort into, helping get me to 13 years. Amazing. I really appreciate it. But with that, enough of the sappy thank yous. Time to get into the news. The South Carolina Supreme Court on Wednesday upheld the constitutionality of the state's three methods of carrying out the death penalty. The state carrying out executions had been challenged. Specifically, the challenge came from four inmates who were condemned to death. They challenged the constitutionality of Section 24-3-530 of the South Carolina Code, which gave three options by which the state could carry out inmates' death sentences. The inmates that I mentioned before challenged having to choose between electrocution and a firing squad when the state was unable to procure the drugs necessary for lethal injection. So, for those who don't remember, just a quick background. At some point, the state put in their code that any inmates that were sentenced to death had to choose between two methods. Those methods for years and years were the electric chair and lethal injection. You may remember that some of the companies that provided lethal injection drugs no longer wanted to do so for varying reasons, and specifically states that didn't have shield laws. Shield laws make it so whatever companies provide these drugs would not be known publicly that they did so, because who would want their brand associated with killing people purposefully, or well, killing people in any event? But why would you want your brand associated with that? So South Carolina did not have shield laws, and they were having a hard time procuring the drugs necessary for lethal injection. So essentially, because they had written it into law that inmates had to choose between two, there was no longer two options. It was only the electric chair. So essentially, not essentially, it did put executions in the state on hold. That was unacceptable to the state because they just wanted to kill people so badly. They had to figure out a way around it. So you may remember this as well. They said, hey, well, how about this? If we're having a hard time passing shield laws, and even if we do pass them, there's no guarantee we're going to get the drugs we need, because other states are having problems as well. Let's just create a new method. All right, which method do we think we can get upheld is not being cruel and unusual? Let's go back to the firing squad. And so that's what they did. It was proposed, the legislature passed it, and then the governor signed it into law. So now inmates again had a choice between two methods, the chair and a firing squad. A lot of people thought that was, especially the firing squad, was not acceptable. That is not a method of execution we should be carrying out. Of course, a lot of people think that there shouldn't be any methods of execution, but one battle at a time. And so there were challenges to that. Now, since then, a shield law has been passed in the state. So that means there's a chance that the state will be able to more easily procure the drugs necessary for lethal injection, in which case the inmates will have the option between the three. Uh, some organizations, including like the ACLU, have thought that this was unconstitutional, was cruel and unusual, and should be removed. Now, the ACLU, for their part, just believes death penalty should be eliminated. Period. But it was, specifically the firing squad was what a lot of organizations and people were challenging. So that's the background on it. But as I mentioned, the majority on the South Carolina Supreme Court upheld the state's use of all three methods. So that is where it stands currently. Will there be further challenges? Perhaps, once the state Supreme Court weighs in, it can move up from there, of course, or it can try to be challenged later under, maybe a different method, whatever angle they were going for, they can try a different one. But for now, all three are upheld. So expect executions at some point to continue in the state, and those on death row will have to choose between those three methods. If there's any updates, I will be sure to let you know. This is an interesting piece of news that we found out this week. The U.S. Coast Guard plans to investigate the Titan submersible implosion that happened over a year ago here in the Charleston area. Specifically, they're going to hold some formal hearings in mid-September in North Charleston, which I just found kind of interesting. Why was North Charleston chosen for this? It wasn't really stated, but it's just interesting that they're going to have these hearings in this area. So, for those who may not remember or just need a quick refresher, the Titan submersible was an expedition that went previously had gone to the site of the Titanic wreck, the shipwreck from the Titanic. There had been multiple tours in this little, submarine-like, you know, I almost said device, but that makes it sound smaller than it is. But a submersible that kind of resembles a submarine, but very smaller, much smaller version of one. They had many successful expeditions down there, but you may remember about a year ago, there was one that was about an hour and 47 minutes into its dive down to the Titanic wreck site. Specifically, it happened on Sunday, June 18th. Eventually, they lost contact with the submersible, and it was unsure what exactly had happened to it. Turned out there was an implosion, which killed all 5 people that were on board. You may remember there was like an extensive search operation that happened over multiple days before ultimately they knew that this had been an implosion. They did find the submersible on the ocean floor, just 300 meters off of the bow of the Titanic, and now they're going to do the full investigation, come out with a report to officially say 100% what had happened, what went wrong, and whatever else they deem is appropriate for this report. Now, as far as the details, it is a public hearing, believe it or not. So that means the general public can attend, but there is limited space, which I'll get to in a moment. So the hearings are for the Marine Board of Investigation, and they're going to consider all evidence related to the loss of the Titan. And all of these hearings will take place at Charleston County Council Chambers, which are located at 4045 Bridgeview Drive in North Charleston. The hearing plans on examining all aspects of this tragedy, including pre accident historical events, if they were following regulatory compliance, crew member duties and qualifications, mechanical and structural systems, the emergency response, and just the submersible industry in general, since this is becoming more of a touristy thing, where really anybody who has enough money can create a company that can go and explore wrecks, not just the Titanic, but any wrecks. So they're going to investigate all aspects of this. The formal hearings, I should say, is scheduled to begin at 8:30 a.m. on Monday, September 16th. All subsequent meetings will also be held at 8:30 at the same location. The schedule right now, in addition to that first day I mentioned, they also plan on meeting, and this is all September 17th, 19th, 20th, 23rd, 24th, 25th, 26th, and if necessary, they have the 27th blocked off as well. So several hearings with opportunities for the public to either see this in person or they can also live stream it. So, due to capacity limits, members of the public are being encouraged to instead view online instead of actually going and arriving in person. If you're interested in the live stream information, it's going to be published closer to that first date of September 16th. I'll be sure to pass that along in some capacity, whether it's on this podcast or social media channels, etc. But yes, the hearings for this tragedy will be coming in North Charleston. Again, unsure why this city was chosen specifically, but regardless, it's going to be happening here and is interesting, and we'll have kind of a different view than we would have if this investigation was being held somewhere else. It just kind of adds an extra wrinkle to an already interesting situation that a lot of people, although we pretty much know what happened, there could be some details that come out that are important, or may change some aspects of what we believe occurred, or maybe more likely maybe some the run up to it, some things that we didn't know previously. So we'll be sure to keep an eye on this and keep you up to date on anything that happens with the hearings. But again, it will be taking place in North Charleston over several days in mid to late September. It is open to the public, but there's limited seating, so there will be a live stream if you're interested in that as well. If you are anywhere near the Charleston Harbor on Saturday, you may see a parade of boats with MAGA flags and similar all around. And the reason for that is a pro Donald Trump boat parade will be taking over the Charleston Harbor. This will be similar to what happened 4 years ago when some of his supporters here in the Charleston area did the same thing. That one, the events are going to be very similar, although they are unrelated. So yes, on August 3rd, which is Saturday, hundreds of boats of all sizes that are expected to be decorated in Trump flags, streamers, and whatever else, they're all expected to travel across an area of the harbor and what they're calling a flotilla. that is backing the Republican presidential nominee. Specifically, the event is called the MAGA Boat Parade 2024. It's a repeat, as I said, of an event that happened 4 years ago. That was on Memorial Day weekend of 2020, right smack dab in the middle of the pandemic, in which thousands of people on hundreds of boats all kind of traveled the same pathway. Specifically, was a 5 mile long pathway of all these pro-Trump folks. So if you see that out there, that's why, that's what's going on. I'm sure all the boats will be all decorated and stuff. The MAGA folks sure do love their merchandise and Trump and MAGA related, again, flags, posters, hats, t-shirts, whatever. There's all sorts of merch out there. So you expect to see a lot of that in the harbor, and I'm sure around the downtown Charleston area after, if some of them will probably go downtown or whatever. So that's what's going on. So just passing along that information for all of you to stop the questions on Saturday. Like, what the heck's going on in the harbor? We have no idea how many people are actually going to partake in this event. But as I said, the last one had thousands of people on hundreds of boats. That's according to the Post and Courier. But that seems to be in line with the estimations that the Charleston police put out after the event. So expect it's a good chance it'll be something similar. So it could be very crowded out there in the harbor. So that's what will be going on Saturday. Been a little bit since we had an update on the Murdaugh situation. So here we go. There was an update this week. Tentative dates have been set for oral arguments in Alex Murdaugh's appeal to his federal sentence on the financial crimes. This is not related to the murder. Well, not directly related to the murder trial. So United States District Judge Richard Gergel sentenced Murdaugh to 40 years for financial crimes back on April 1st of this year. That actually took place in Charleston. The murder trial happened in a different county, Hampton County, if I remember correctly. That's where the Murdaughs were, where he lived. But in any event, the financial trial, or the sentencing, I should say, happened here in Charleston. Now, Murdaugh was also ordered by Gergel to repay $8.76 million in restitution. Not quite sure how that's going to happen, but that was part of the sentencing. Then we found out on July 9th that some court documents were filed that said that the Court of Appeals for the 4th District had put oral arguments for Murdaugh's appeal regarding that sentence on the calendar for October 29th through November 1st. Now, interestingly, that will be happening in Richmond, Virginia, so going out of the state completely. Now, you may remember that this appeal is because Murdaugh and his attorney said that the punishment for financial crimes was 40 years, as I mentioned, which is essentially a death sentence for him based on his age. He won't be able to get out of jail. Now, that's putting aside the fact that he's already serving 2 life sentences for the murder of his wife Maggie and son Paul. So he's going to be in jail for the rest of his life anyway. Obviously, that is with the asterisk that doesn't, some appeal doesn't happen with that, of course. That's still out there in the ether related to some controversy with the clerk of court, which we don't need to get into now, but you may remember. So assuming nothing happens there, he's already in court, he's going to be in jail for the rest of his life. Regardless of that, they are arguing that the sentence is extreme, that these are financial crimes, and although they are crimes, they shouldn't equal a life sentence for someone. And so that's what this appeal is based on. And it has been agreed to be heard. And that is where we're at now. The oral arguments for that will be starting in late October in Richmond, Virginia. So just as a recap, I have already mentioned part of the sentencing, but it happened back on September 2023. First, he received a 27-year sentence in state court after pleading guilty to 22 charges that included bank fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit wire fraud and bank fraud, and money laundering. That was the state sentence. The federal sentence of 40 years was on top of that, or I should say was not on top of it, meaning he has to serve 27, then 40. It was just added, it was a separate case. There's 2 cases together. That's what I meant, because that sentence was going to run concurrently with the state sentencing. So it's not a 67-year sentence. It's still just 40, and I'm using just in quotes, as that is a lot of time. So he has those two sentences running concurrently. That is what's being appealed. And as I mentioned, regardless of what happens there, he is still currently serving 2 life sentences for those murders. And we're still waiting to see if any movement's going to happen with the appeal that they requested there. I'll keep you up to date on both of those situations as there are any kind of emerging details. And our final story is an update involving Boeing, and there's all sorts of stuff going on with them, of course. And why am I talking about Boeing on a Charleston-based podcast? For those who may be new to the area, Boeing, in addition to having a lot of their business out in Seattle, Washington, they have a significant portion of their business in North Charleston. So it does involve a lot of people in this area because they work for the company. So lawyers for relatives of some of the people that were killed in a Boeing Max jetliner crash, actually crashes, there was multiple, have asked a federal judge to reject a plea agreement that the aircraft maker had struck with U.S. prosecutors. They are saying, the families that is, are saying that it's too lenient and it lets Boeing avoid accountability for causing 346 deaths in those 2 accidents. Now, this all took place on Wednesday in the news, but you may remember on a previous podcast, I had talked about this deal that Boeing had struck with the federal government. And at that time, it was unclear, if it was going to be accepted, and some time has passed. And now lawyers, is giving families a chance to look at this and get lawyers involved if they felt necessary. Obviously, they did feel that way. Through their lawyers, they're basically arguing that the Justice Department has treated Boeing lightly because the company is a major contractor to the U.S. government. So they're saying, hey, this is too lenient. It's a fairly significant punishment, but in the grand scheme of things, they've caused over 300 deaths, and it needs to be a stronger punishment. So the current deal as it stands, Boeing agreed to back on July 7th. They agreed to plead guilty to a single count of conspiracy to commit fraud. And this was all in an effort to settle allegations that it deceived the Federal Aviation Administration regulators who approved the 737 MAX and then broke a 2021 settlement that would have let the company escape criminal prosecution. So there's a lot of different aspects to this. Without getting super in the weeds, there was a lot of allegations which seem to have been proven true, especially since Boeing decided to plead guilty to them, that they were hiding things from FAA regulators. They weren't being truthful about some aspects of the business that led to safety issues, and obviously the biggest of safety issues, and that is the death of passengers. So then they're basically saying, yeah, we deceived FAA regulators. We also broke a previous settlement agreement that would have helped us escape criminal prosecution. So now we are going to have to accept some criminal prosecution. Under the deal, Boeing would have to pay a fine of at least $243.6 million. In addition to that, they would have to invest $455 million in compliance and safety programs, and they were going to be placed on probation for 3 years. Obviously, those money sums are huge, but the families still think that's not enough. As for the money, the Justice Department and Boeing would jointly pick a monitor that would oversee the company's compliance, and not just make sure that money that's supposed to be going to compliance and safety programs not only would be going to those programs, but that those programs were effective and being run appropriately. Now, the U.S. District Judge Reed O'Connor, who is based out of Fort Worth, Texas, can accept that corporate plea agreement and the proposed sentence, or reject the deal outright, which would likely lead to new negotiations between Boeing and prosecutors. It wouldn't automatically mean, nope, this is going to trial. It would just mean, okay, it wasn't accepted. We have to go back and try to come to a different agreement with maybe some harsher penalties for Boeing, and then that process would start over. So lawyers for relatives of some of the passengers that were killed in those 2 737 MAX crashes, and by the way, those crashes happened, the first one was in Indonesia in 2018. The other one was in Ethiopia in 2019. The lawyers for those relatives have asked the judge to reject the deal outright and instead schedule a jury trial within 70 days. So not only is the family saying reject it, but we want them to go to trial, forget this plea agreement nonsense. More than likely, like I said, though, if the judge does decide to reject the deal, they'll probably let them go back to negotiations instead of jumping to trial. But we'll see what happens. When there are updates, I'll be sure to let you know. So that'll do it for this edition of Holy City Center Radio. I hope you had a great week and have an amazing weekend ahead. As I mentioned at the top, go to holycitycenter.com/calendar if you're looking for some plans for this weekend or and any date going forward. I want to say thank you to all of you again for helping Holy City Center hit 13 years as an entity. The podcast is just I think we're on our third year right now going. We haven't hit the anniversary, but it's not been along as much as the website has, but it's part of the Holy City Center brand, so I appreciate it. I also want to thank Lindsay Marie Collins with LMC Sound System. She produces each and every show, makes it sound amazing. And a big thank you to Tyler Boone, whose music is featured in every episode and makes me sound a little cooler when I got that track playing under me. I hope you all have a great weekend. Thank you again. Until I talk to you on Monday, good night and good luck.